They are accusing Democrats of saying we spend too much. For anyone that wants to entertain that thought, I ask you to think about the last time a person has said in this country that the government does too much for them, that their Social Security check was too high, that teachers are paid too much. When was the last time anyone has heard or seen that?
Another quote. President Biden already lowered the deficit by $1.7 trillion. They say his budget would cut the deficit by another $3 trillion by eliminating wasteful spending on big oil and pharma, we're told. But it is, in fact, our Democratic colleagues who prefer to maintain their massive subsidies for the elites and the wealthy in their so-called Inflation Reduction Act just last year. My friend from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, said, quote, I ask you, think about the last time a person has said in this country that the government does too much for them. When was the last time anyone has heard or seen that? I'll say it. I'll say it right here. I don't want the government doing most of the things that the government is doing to interfere with the ability of the American people to carry out their lives. Federal, state, and local. When was the last time you had a bureaucrat show up and you said, oh joy, thank you, I'm really glad there's a bureaucrat here? When was the last time you were thankful for $32 trillion in debt, $100,000 almost for every man, woman, and child in America? Anybody thankful for $32 trillion in debt? Anybody? Anybody thankful for a border that's wide open being exploited by cartels while fentanyl comes in and kills our children? Everybody thankful for that Department of Homeland Security that doesn't actually secure the homeland? Everybody thankful for an FBI that went after Scott Smith and labeled him a domestic terrorist for daring to defend his daughter in a school board meeting because she was assaulted in a bathroom? Anybody thankful for the IRS knocking on your door, auditing the poor and the minorities 3 to 5 times more? People thankful for that? Are you thankful for the EPA or the Department of Interior that sent a man to prison because he had some ponds on his ranch in Montana? We have a government that is weaponized against the American people and is undermining our liberties, and they want more of it. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle want more government. They want more taxes. They want more spending. They want more bureaucrats knocking on your door.
To the Honorable Chip Roy for 10 minutes.
I thank my friend from Florida, Mr. Mills. I thank my colleagues here. I thank you, gentlemen, for testifying here today. And I'd ask my staff they'd put the map up here on the board. And if you would please, the technology folks, would you please play the shooter on roof behind President Trump angle video? And as we get this queued up and we start to play it, I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Bongino. Trying to through the question that I'm wrestling with, a lot of Americans are wrestling with, which is whether or not the failures here that we're all observing, everybody agrees there was failure, almost catastrophic failure, and certainly catastrophic for Mr. Comparator and his family. But was there more? Was there willful blindness here? So if you could cue up the video, that'd be great. They've got that queued up. If they don't, then I'm just going to go ahead and proceed.
Great gentlemen. So we're going to bring him up for Can we bring him up for a couple of minutes? You get ready, McCormick. You get ready. I'll get you up here. The world will see a vibrant Republican.
See beyond the president, you can see the shooter moving across the roof. Now, I look at this as someone who is a prosecutor, had worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office, had worked in the Attorney General's office, not as someone who was a sniper like Mr. Mills or Mr. Crane, working in the Secret Service. But to be very clear, the perimeter, the building he shot from is outside of the perimeter. And the video we see, we can see him clearly just a mere 130 yards away. So here's the setup that I want to ask. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Bongino. Do you believe that you can just chalk up to mere incompetence that the Secret Service did not attend the 9 o'clock meeting for scheduling purposes? They literally just didn't attend. Can you chalk up, and just, I'm going to go down the list and jump in. Can you chalk up to mere incompetence the conversations about the communications that we talked about before, where you didn't have a body present and they were using the cell phones, and they did not retrieve the radios, as Mr. Higgins has reported? Can you chalk it up to mere incompetence that they identified crooks about an hour ahead of time, and that President Trump, was never removed from the stage? They didn't delay, they didn't hold him back, they didn't remove him from the potential danger. That the perimeter did not include the buildings around over here, and to the extent, should there have been a perimeter that was farther out, and to the extent that the perimeter wasn't farther out, that they at least make sure the building wasn't covered. Is that just incompetence? Is it just incompetence that there was no drone being flown and the drone was turned down by the Secret Service? Was it just incompetence that the shooter had a drone, as the FBI director testified in front of the House Judiciary Committee, that he literally had flying within a couple hundred feet of the stage the same day, mere hours before the shooting? Is it just incompetence, what we're hearing now about the whistleblowers saying that there were no canines? Was it just incompetence that there wasn't sufficient policing along the security border? Was it just incompetence that there was allegedly an abandoning of the post due to heat? That there was supposed to be someone on top of the roof and that they didn't get on the roof because it was too hot? Is it just incompetence that there was additional security requests turned down, according to the memos that we saw out of Senator Josh Hawley, and encouraging agents not to request to additional security requests? And was it just incompetence what we saw with respect to the police body footage, which I'll play here in just a second, if we could cue up the police body footage video, where you've got the local police talking about what they said to the Secret Service? If y'all could play that video real quick, and then I want you to respond.
Well, body's a good, that's a good word. I told them they need to post the guy over here. I told them that the Secret Service. I told them that Tuesday. I told them to post guys over here. I have no contact with you. What? I thought you must want to. No, we're inside. Alpha 1, Bravo 1. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Thank you all. Mr. Bongino,
I told them to post.
Can you respond to that?
I wasn't even concerned about it because I thought that's all we
can you respond to that? Sure. Can you respond to that question? Because that's what the American people want to know.
You know, Congressman, if you had just ended with your first statement and said, well, we may have screwed up the perimeter, you could maybe attribute it to ignorance. Layered incompetence always means intent, correct? So I'll give you an example. You're in a mall parking lot, it's 97 degrees, and you leave a kid in there and you close the door. Did they intend to kill the kid? Probably not. But how stupid do you have to be to do that? So in Secret Service training, you're basically taught a ring-based system, but don't think of it as rings. Think of it as a three-dimensional ring, like a bubble with rings. So you got this circle, but it's three-dimensional above and below. In that outer ring, again, this is Secret Service 101, Charlie Brown encyclopedia stuff. This isn't like advanced level PDT, protective detail training. In that outer ring, you have police officers. That outer ring is out to about 1,000 yards, which is about what a really technically proficient sniper can hit. Why was the perimeter set to, again, absolute total incompetence? But then factor in the other things, and I just want to add a few more. How is it that a counter surveillance unit whose actual job is to detect, to counter surveillance, that's what they do. They're the best at what they do. We asked the question during the conversation we had earlier. How is it that they missed this guy roaming around when the police officers, clearly using their good law enforcement instincts, said we've got a problem? The answer is because they weren't there. Is that incompetence, or is that shutting the door in 97 degrees with your kid there going, I just didn't know? How did you not have a roof line 130 yards away secured when you're taught day one in Secret Service training that the effective range of a really quality sniper is out to 1,000 yards? How did you not have a drone? That not only did you not have a drone, again, this is where we get to the shutting the door in 97 degrees and pretending you didn't know. It was offered. They offered you a drone. It's unforgivable. And just think of the rings quickly, and I'll wrap this up. So in the outer ring, you have police officers, you have counter surveillance, and you have a protective intelligence team. Protective intelligence team is trained to go and find threats. They miss them. There's no counter surveillance team. The cops catch it, but because the comms break down, they miss it. In that middle perimeter, you have what they call post standers. Post standers they're not DTD agents. They're field office agents. They're not Donald Trump detail agents. Those guys were not even Secret Service. They were HSI, most of them, who are great guys and were fantastic. But that's not what they do. If you grab me as a former Secret Service guy and said, hey, Dan, can you go do a Homeland Security investigation list? No, that's not what I learned. We are training Secret Service agents to do protection so we don't have to use other entities that don't do protection. So that's the middle perimeter. So that breaks down. The inner perimeter, as you just saw, and I'm glad you played that video, envision that as what we would call the shift, the body guys, right? He's got a shift around him and supervisors. Everyone missed that guy crawling across the roof when he defeated the external, the middle, and the internal perimeter. You shut the door in 97 degrees. I'm sorry. Layered intent, layered incompetence like that is absolutely intent.
I've got another question on that, but I just want to ask you, Mr. Prince, real quick. Do you have any a relatively short comment on that? Can you dismiss all of this as sheer incompetence?
The question I want to have answered is if other counter sniper agents, officers, saw any person laying in a prone position with a rifle pointed at the President of the United States, do they have authorization to take a shot immediately, or do they have to get permission? Because if the Secret Service wasn't there and they were laying at a stakeout for a bank robbery, would they have to get permission if they saw means and intent to murder someone? I don't understand why any of the other officers didn't engage sooner.
Mr. Schaefer, do you have any comment on that in terms of the engagement and the rules of engagement that were in place?
Yeah, absolutely. I can clarify that a little bit. So as a law enforcement sniper, we have a lot of responsibilities and inherited flexibility. One of those flexible procedures or statuses that we incur is known as compromised authority. Compromised authority in the law enforcement sense basically lays out the requirements for a deadly force response. And in that point in time, based on all the prerequisites that were identified and all the checks in the boxes that were made, Mr. Crook sort of met that level or that threshold.
I'll let some of the experts on that subject follow up on that. I think there's probably some more follow up there. I just want to ask one last question, my last minute of time. Mr. Bongino, we talked about this before. I have seen credible information, the extent to which the shooter had significant explosives that were sophisticated beyond that you would expect some 20-year-old just to put together, and that he had sophisticated detonation devices on his person, or a sophisticated detonation device, and importantly that his digital footprint is completely MIA, that his digital footprint is missing, and that how can a 20-year-old in today's time have no digital footprint? So do you have any thoughts on that, any comments on that? And that'll be my last question.
Well, 4 years of doing protective intelligence investigations with the Secret Service, interviewed probably hundreds of people who have credibly threatened our protectees. I've never seen anything like it. If you would have told me it was a 60-year-old guy who had lived most of his life without a computer and for the last 10 years had been planning this, hard to believe but digestible. You're telling me a 20-year-old kid who's grown up in the digital era figured this out when he was, what, 13, to never get an online presence? We've seen nothing. Nothing. We're now 6 weeks in. There's not a Facebook photo. You know, it's incredible. We know every single thing about these shooting incidents when there's a political narrative to be had by the media and the other side. We do. You know who their high school girlfriend was. Sadly, you know everything about these people. We know nothing about this guy. And sophisticated explosives, we have this massive law enforcement bureaucracy. No one's got him with an online search history at a library saying, how do I build this? He's 20 years old. It just defies logic. I can tell you, again, 4 years doing these exact investigations, never, ever seen or heard anything like this in my life.
You'll bet.
Thank you so much.